Donato's just didn't add bacon to their pizzas. They added bacon to their bacon. It's Donato's new Bacon Duo pizzas. 2 pizzas, each with 2 kinds of bacon. Try the new Pepperoni Bacon Duo with pepperoni, Canadian bacon, and hardwood smoked bacon. And the Chipotle Bacon Duo with Canadian bacon and Chipotle seasoned bacon. Now get $2 off a large Bacon Duo or any large pizza. Use promo code 2. Donato's. Every piece is important.
Who are you texting?
My therapist.
You text with your therapist?
Text, video chat, call. Yep.
That sounds too easy. How did you find her?
I just went to betterhelp.com/save. She's a licensed therapist and it's all online. I connect when it's convenient for me and don't waste time driving anywhere. Plus, it's affordable.
I wonder if I should try it.
It's great to talk to someone in confidence. She's helped me sort out quite a few things. And right now you save 10% off the first month when you go through betterhelp.com/save.
betterhelp.com/save. Got it.
All right, it's another film study as we look at Week 14. This time we get to look at the offense, which was a whole lot more fun, I think, and it's going to be a lot of fun to discuss. Ken McKusick, how you doing?
Life's good, Josh. How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm now obsessed since moving to Florida and having this nice office. I'm now obsessed with trying to get rid of the reverb in this office. So I spent today hanging up some curtains, trying to make it improve. So that's been my day, is obsession over my voice.
It's good you have the time to do that. I know you've been real busy lately at work.
Well, I squeezed it in the past hour. By all day, I mean the past hour I worked on this, yes.
All right.
But joining us, and I think this is a great person to join. We got Charles Walker from the Baltimore Sun, who listed this game as an instant reaction, as one we'll talk about for decades. And I think that's a great way that we're going to get started on this anyway. Charles, how are you doing?
Doing okay, guys. Glad to be on. Ken, I've enjoyed reading your work for a number of years, so happy to be here.
Okay, appreciate that, Childs. I've certainly enjoyed the writing of the Sun too, and just talk about that for a little bit, because I think the addition of Jonas certainly adds a very technical slant to a lot of the analysis. I think that I've noticed a change in pretty much everybody's writing to maybe pander's the wrong word, but try and attract an audience that's a little more technical in terms of football fans as the world gets more technical.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think that if you're not trying to do that, you really are behind at this point. And I think we've all probably realized that over the last few years. I think some of the best cutting edge writing on football that we've seen in the last few years has sort of had that bent. And so I think everybody is trying to, deepen the understanding, watch more film, watch the All-22 every week, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't think that was the norm when I started really writing about the team 8 or 9 years ago, but I definitely think that it is now. And yeah, I think it's great that Jonas came on the beat 3 years ago, and I think he really made it a point to step up to that. And I love reading his pieces. I mean, I think it does bring a sort of a fresh perspective to what we do. I came up as more of a feature writer, so that's still sort of my bent. I mean, I'm probably looking for the human interest, side of the players more. I mean, that's still how I come at it. But, again, I'm writing about the team, from a more technical side with the scouting reports and then the 5 things that I do after every game. So, yeah, I mean, I certainly have to be way more aware of that stuff, I think, that I was when I started.
Yeah, I think the 5 things in particular I thought were really excellent, and I've been reading those on a weekly basis and appreciating them. You talked about the human interest component of the game, so this is going to be a special memory. This game, a special memory for all of us, I think, for many years. We just talked a little bit during our production meeting about the 2003 Seattle game, the 2000 Jacksonville game. Also, in terms of great regular season home games, are a couple that really stick out in my mind as being in the same category as this one. Where do you, in 2037, do you think we'll be talking more and know more about this game than we know about the 2003 Seattle game today?
I think there's certainly a strong chance, and partly because Lamar is such a compelling figure, and you certainly get the sense that we're going to be telling Lamar Jackson stories in 15, 20, 30 years, right? And I think that if that's the case, this game is going to come up. I mean, just because it had such a remarkable narrative give and take to it. I mean, he played brilliantly through the first 3 quarters. I mean, and that in and of itself was, fun to watch. But just the drama of him leading the field and then coming back at the point when he did. I mean, you just can't. I mean, you couldn't script it. You really couldn't. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And I think that's what will set it apart. I mean, that it's that player who's the sort of center of everything, guy that we all feel like we're going to be talking about for a long time. And this was unquestionably one of the major moments in his career to this point, maybe the major moment.
Yeah, he one of the things he was always accused of is never having comeback wins. This certainly meets that standard. And thinking about the 2003 Seattle game, Anthony Wright had a child that night, and his wife was given a game ball by Brian Billick for delaying inducement of labor until after the game. And that should be a greater human interest story. But Lamar Jackson, that mysterious door he went through, and whatever he was doing behind it, whatever that might have been, and then coming out and being on the field at the proper time. And also the footwear thing, they're Lamar Jackson stories. So they take into account. That's why I agree with you. I think that we probably will be talking about this more, at least from that human interest angle. That 2003 Seattle game has all kinds of plays that are ingrained in Ravens history in ways that this game doesn't have as many. But the number 2 stories for Lamar Jackson and all those other things, they're going to stick with us. And
I was trying to remember if there was a regular season game that stuck out like this in the 8 or so years that I've been covering the team. And I couldn't think of one on this level. I really couldn't. I mean, there's some playoff games that I would say differently about, but that's always, you always kind of put that in a different category, right?
Yeah, I would. The Mile High Miracle, the AFC Championship at New England, and I think if I go back to 2000, the game at Tennessee that they won, all fall into that higher level category. I'd even say maybe the 2008 game at Tennessee was a really special game of the same ilk. But yeah, they are in a separate class, and I'm careful with the qualifiers in that. But I don't think there's been a game in the last 8 years. First of all, one of the important things is a springboard into a playoff run, and we might have that this year. We might not. If they lose this week, this game may fall into some lack of recollection relative to say that 2003 game. Yeah.
Harbaugh actually said that today when we talked to him. Basically, if we let up this week, then that immediately sort of wipes out what happened on Monday, right? So obviously that's the mentality they have to have, but there's a lot of truth in that.
All right. So 3 more wide receivers to the COVID list today. We hope this is nothing serious, but Brown, Boykin, and Prochet, a huge component of the team's speed. That's the wrong way to look at this. These are 3 human beings who are on a close contact list. We hope the best for them. None of them actually got sick.
Yeah. I mean, certainly you had to take it as good news that, they were on for contact tracing reasons and not for positive tests. But I mean, look, we've seen how this thing goes. I mean, there's no guarantee that one or more of them doesn't test positive in the next few days. So, I mean, it's going to be a question mark all week, I think, until we see them come back. And, they're significant players, needless to say.
One of the things that's happening on the field is the players get excited and they're still going mask to mask, meaning helmet to helmet, after the play. When they get excited about a touchdown, they lift each other up and they're hugging each other, and Harbaugh's hugging, Brown as soon as he comes off the field. They must not have known that thing, but it kind of negates a lot of the mask wearing on the sideline to have that going on the field anyway.
Well, I think that's part of what we've wondered through this whole thing, right? I mean, that as many things as you can control with the protocols, there's obviously still a ton of interactions that you can't control, and there's no way around it, right? I mean, you can't have guys playing masks on the field. And short of that, I don't know what you would do.
Yeah, it's obviously a very tricky situation, and you're asking effectively these young men to bubble themselves, and that's the group exactly that does not want to bubble themselves during this whole process. Is people who want to go on with their lives and are enjoying it. All right, well, let's give Josh a chance for a reader here, and then we'll be back with you. All
right, and you guys are being a little too nice trying to talk about this game in 20 years like we'll care about what happened on the field. Sports is all about myth and legend, so in 20 years, it'll all be about Lamar running to the toilet. Whether it's true or not, that's going to be the story in 20 years. Speaking of this weekend, if you want to hop on board over at MyBookie, right now the line is 13 points. You can hop on board with the Ravens if you think they can really run the score up on the Jags, or if not, take the other side. But either way, head on over to MyBookie, and when you make your deposit using the promo code RAVENS, they'll match you halfway and give you a head start on building your bankroll. For instance, put in $400 and they'll give you an extra $200 to play with. Joining and depositing is simple, it's quick, and more importantly, when it's time to get paid, that's quick too. So treat yourself to some extra cash in your pocket this holiday season by investing in your intuition. Use the code RAVENS for them to match you halfway and to also help out the Film Study podcast.
All right. Thanks, Josh. We'll jump right in where we first do every week with the offensive line, talk a little bit about what happened there. And Childs, just jump in whenever you like here, of course. Overall, the Ravens had 56 scored snaps in this game. They did have a spike. That didn't count. 2.5 of the 4 sacks were charged to the offensive line. They didn't allow any other quarterback hits in this game. So 2.5 sacks is still a ton for 24 dropbacks in this game. So that's not good. They also allowed 8 pressures. Lamar ran out of some other pressures. And one of the things you'll see this week is if you look on PFF, they've got a lot lower scores on the linemen. One of the things that's showing up in there is that they've allocated pressures on plays where I allowed the lineman to be run out of a pressure by Lamar. In fact, Ronnie Stanley had that happen a lot last year, but it's happened some of this year to Phillips and some other players certainly in this game. Let's see what else is going on here. Ample time and space on 25% of dropbacks, 6 out of 24. That's better, amazingly, than the first game where Lamar had 4 out of 27 ample time and spaces. That's a 3-second pocket, as we say at Childs. Lamar, that first game, had a 152 rating despite that real lack of time.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to talk about an overall sense. I thought the line played pretty well as a total entity. I mean, aside from especially the problems that Phillips had early in the game before they really went to Fluker. And I thought, especially on the interior, I thought the guards played very well. So I mean, I don't think you chalk this up as a disappointing game for the line overall. I mean, even with Garrett, I mean, he had a couple big plays. He had the big play on McSorley at the end that he blew up. But I mean, I thought by and large they handled him fairly well.
Yeah, I do think they did that fairly well. And my standard for what I expect in taking care of Myles Garrett is pretty loose, frankly. I mean, he's obviously the most dominant pass rusher in the game or close to it. Aaron Donald may be ahead of him. In terms of an edge rusher, he probably is it. But Brown drew him most of the game. He allowed 4 pressures. Brown also missed 8 blocks. He's having a hard time contributing on the backside of run blocks. Ravens have a primarily right-handed run game, so that puts him on the backside of those plays a lot. He's had some hard times contributing there. He had a 1/6 contribution to a sack. He made 3 of his 4 pulls, which was nice. And a lot of those, several of those were these counters where the Ravens were running the opposite direction. Anyway, C for him for the game. Bozeman, I thought, played well. 1 pressure, a 1/6 of a sack, 3 missed blocks. Here's the big number for Bozeman. It's the number you should be looking at every week. 13 of 14 made pulls in this game. So the Ravens, obviously, he drives the power run game. The notion that Bozeman can be moved to center, I don't think it's on the table inside the castle anywhere where they know how important he is to driving that game with his success pulling.
Well, I mean, certainly not in the short term, because I mean he's proven to be such a solution where he is. And I mean, McCurry to me is playing fine at center. Certainly well enough to hold that job for the rest of this year. So, I mean, I'm sure they'll look at the whole big picture of the offensive line in the offseason. They have some decisions to make there, but I like Bozeman where he is. Absolutely.
Yeah. Me too. So McCary also solid in this game, 1/3 of a sack, 1 false start. It was unfortunate, 2nd straight week with a false start. You shouldn't have that happen at center very often, by the way, but he moved the football this time. Last week, he snapped it late, and the false start got a charge to Bredesen, but since the entire line moved, it's pretty clear it's his false start. 3 missed blocks in this game. One thing I look for with McCary, because there's an arm length issue, and with several of the Ravens interior players, that's really an issue, is how often he gets shed. He was shed twice in this game. That's not too bad for 56 plays. So, relatively decent. I agree with you. I think the center job is his for the rest of the season. And I don't think he's really a legitimate tackle option. I know we keep hearing this, and he did play well there for a half against New England, but I don't really believe he's a legitimate tackle issue. I think that the Ravens will get their tackle play out of the 3 guys, even though Phillips has had a lot of problems that we've seen there the last 2 games.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, obviously they don't have a perfect solution at right tackle, right? That's why we're talking about this week after week. But I don't think you create problems elsewhere to try to solve that problem. I guess is how I would look at it right now.
Yeah, and the Ravens have indicated by their actions that's how they solve problems, with single change solutions as opposed to reshuffles where you have to make 3 changes to go to do one. The last time Harbaugh did that, made a really big change like that, was entering the 2012 playoffs when they finally put McKinney after sitting him the whole season, moved Orr to right tackle, that was a great relief to get him out of left tackle, and then moved Assembly to left guard, where he drove a lot of that postseason run with some great play.
Yeah, and I mean that was. When you look back on the 12 run, I think that was as big a move as any move they made. That shuffle.
Yeah, completely agree. All right, so B for McCary in this game. Powers, he had no penalties in the game. He scored well by my system, but he was a beneficiary of Lamar running out of pressure that he had a hand in. He's physical in the run game. One of the things we harp on occasionally with Powers is his length. He's got above average length on that interior where everybody else is fairly short-armed, especially now that they moved Phillips to tackle. And he's using it quite well. He had 5 missed blocks, 1/3 of a sack in this, a B after adjustment. And again, I think now Powers has 5 NFL games essentially under his belt, and I do not see him losing that right guard spot with as well as he's played there for the rest of this year.
And I think he's turned into a pretty interesting story overall this year, because I mean you had a lot of people suggesting that he might be cut in camp, right? I mean he was guarded
right.
He was guarded as maybe on the wrong side of the bubble, in those days right before cutdown day. So I mean, to go from there to being a guy that at this point they're plugging in and sort of you don't even worry that much about him week to week. I mean that's quite an evolution in 14 weeks.
Yeah. Do you have any insight into this in terms of what the Ravens were seeing at practice, that it took so long for him to get his real chance? I mean, he didn't get any playing time as a rookie, and there were opportunities to get him in, and they put in Ahinger and other places ahead of him for some playing time. And then in 2020, they have him snapping the ball at center and, moving all over the place. And like you say, he's really a bubble player when they've got new drafted players that they're giving more opportunity than him. And Fluker is also sitting aside, and that still doesn't create an opportunity for him. And what is happening? Do you have any sense of what's going on at practice or anything from the saltiness of responses that would tell you that there's some problem?
I don't necessarily get that sense at this point. I guess my feeling back in camp was that I think in some ways he just doesn't fit their ideal image of an offensive lineman. I mean, he's not this giant ornery, powerhouse guy, which I think in their sort of mind's eye, that's still their ideal, especially of an interior lineman. And I don't know. Beyond that, it's hard for me to say, because I feel like when he's been given opportunities, even in that Pittsburgh game last year, I thought he handled himself just fine. So, and in that sense, I think he's done well with what he's been given.
Yeah, I think so too. And the only issue with him has been some penalties. And the Ravens have a tremendous track record of cleaning up penalties, holding penalties, stupid penalties on offensive linemen in particular. Haven't necessarily been able to clean up roughing the passer penalties, but holding penalties on offensive linemen, they've had real good success with. And Powers has cleaned it up the last 3 games, no penalties, and looked great. And that's been a big part of him turning the season around. Anyway, very happy with him. Phillips started the game at right tackle. So let's talk about him. He only had 13 scored snaps. Went in for a stretch where he played 12 snaps initially. He had portions of 3 sacks. The last one came on his second stint in the game, which lasted a grand total of 1 snap. So he allowed that sack, and then that was it. They pulled him, and they put Fluker in for the rest of the game. So Phillips had 0 net points scored on 13 snaps in this, which, to give you an idea, he would have had to have approximately 16 perfect snaps from that point forward to get to a D- level.
So that's not ideal.
No, it's not ideal. PFF just dumped 3 sacks on him. I didn't really see it that way. I had 1.5 sacks out of the way, but I always apportion out those as I see fit from them, and never give out more than that in total. Anyway, Fluker. Big game. Vernon had a huge game over there, and it wasn't until Fluker was really playing regularly that they got him under control a little bit. He still had 2.5 pressures against Fluker. Fluker missed 4 blocks, but Fluker was a monster in the run game. 3 highlight combination blocks. That was half of the team total for highlights. 5 blocks in level 2. He led the team in that. He was 1-for-1 on pulls. He doesn't really pull very much ever, but he did in this game one time anyway. And he looked more mobile than he has at any time this season, not just more physical.
Yeah, this might have been, I don't know by your grading, but it might have been his best game of the year. Was it?
Not for his grading, but I agree but qualitatively he definitely demonstrated things. It was a C game, very important game. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. When your backup tackle gets a C, that's usually fantastic.
Right.
But the guy they're missing right now, and we're talking about the right tackle situation, but it's really the left tackle situation. I don't know what would happen if Brown went down at this point. I guess they would move Fluker over there and keep Phillips on the right side, which is a pair of scary sounding bookends at this point. And it really begs the question of why they didn't try and make it work with Will Holden while he was here, because I think he could have provided them with something on the left side. At least he has played over there at the NFL level.
No, I agree with you. And I mean, when I always think about it in terms of, every week, who are the guys that they could least afford to lose? And I think Orlando is real close to the top of that list right now. I mean, even though he's not Ronnie in terms of left tackle, I mean, he's absolutely indispensable right now.
Yeah, it's a very big drop off, that's for certain. And the Ravens have had that big drop off before. They've had to deal with it, when they've lost Monroe at times, or when they had Gaither decide he didn't want to play football anymore. That's probably right at the beginning of your tenure with football, right? Yeah. So yeah, that was an ugly situation. But anyway, we talked about Phillips. Skura came in, made 8 of 9 blocks as a 6th offensive lineman. He's playing very well in that role. I'm glad he's still able to do it. Bredesen is obviously out of a job. The other guy who there was talk about Tristan Colon Castillo staying at center. I think people kind of overstated, exactly what he provided the Ravens in the game. Glad he could fill in once, but there was nothing there for me that said he's the answer for, all time going forward. And McCary's played well there since.
Yeah, I thought with Colon Castillo, I thought the excitement about it was about the moment, right? I mean, the fact that he's sort of thrown into the breach and he didn't fall apart. I mean, which, in of itself that week felt like a big deal.
Yeah, it did. It really, if the snaps were on target, things went right that were generally supposed to go right in that game. I think a lot of people appreciate that. We're talking about a lot of different players here. And one of the things that I keep thinking about this team is how lucky they are to get to December with all this depth on the offensive line. Now, they have an unusual situation where they have a lot of guys who are probably just above the replacement level. They're not D or D minus players, they're C players. And they have to now pick. And it's been a hard process for them to find who the guys are. But I think they finally got it now. I think they finally know who their 5 guys are with this game in particular. It'll be Fluker at right tackle. I think we knew the 4 guys on the left side before that. But it's remarkable they have so many players they can still draw on at this point, which is probably some of the reason it was hard for them to find a spot for Holden.
Well, and I mean, I think honestly this was the way we probably talked about the offensive line even way back to camp, that they had a lot of bodies, they had a lot of guys that were at least interesting enough that you might want to play them. It just wasn't clear that they had the 5, right?
Yep, completely agree. All right, let's talk about Lamar a little bit. Obviously, won the AFC Player of the Week. And I'm just looking back at this and saying, he completed 11 passes. He only had 17 attempts, but he completed 11 passes, and he was sacked 4 times. There can't be too many times a quarterback is one Player of the Week under those circumstances. Nice thing about Twitter is there's a lot of people who take your rhetorical wonderings and they look it up and they give you an actual answer on that. So that's terrific. Anyway, Bobby Douglas went 8 for 20 in a game in 1970. You think of Bobby Douglas, maybe he had a lot of running yards. He had 5 carries for 12 yards in that game, but he had 8 for 20 for 4 touchdowns. He was Player of the Week. So that was the best comp we could find for this Lamar game.
Of course, it was a lot more normal to only attempt 20 passes in those days too, right?
Yeah, there you go. And to complete 8, it wasn't the end of the world.
No, that's right. That's right.
Lamar in this game, I thought still frustrating in terms of the missed passes down that left hash on consecutive plays where the line did actually provide him pretty good time, both those opportunities. He just seems to be that quarterback. And we saw this in the first Cleveland game in particular, when facing with a disadvantaged secondary in particular, who just does a little bit better when he's not thinking as much because he's thinking about moving around and getting the ball off. And I think he's also proven with Cleveland, he's got a little bit more gravitational pull, as I think Jonas called it, on that defense to bring them forward.
The one thing I wonder a little bit about those 2 consecutive throws is he his comments have indicated to some degree that is when his arms started to cramp up. That he talked about it again today, and so did Harbaugh. And I guess that started in his left arm, but he said he did feel it in his throwing arm, and it was around that time. And I don't know if that contributed to him sailing those two balls. I mean, certainly we've seen him sail balls in weeks when he was completely healthy. But it's at least interesting to wonder that. And those were two big plays, obviously. I mean, the one to see it would have gone for 30 yards, and the Andrews one that was a touchdown. So I mean, those were
right. If the sailing balls was the only issue, I'd be on the train with that. But here's the problem. The first ball, he needed to throw the line drive to Snead to get it done. The second ball, he needed more arc on that ball and depth on that ball to get Andrews to run under it. Andrews had beaten the defender. So that's the problem. Is it's like two different things. So if he'd said, I sailed both those balls because my arm hurt, and that's how he should have thrown them, that would be one thing. But it wasn't really the case. The second throw needed a different artillery trajectory, we'll call it, to get to the right spot.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. On that 4th and 5 play, we have to talk about that. The great thing about that, and this great Cleveland Browns writer, Jake Burns, who was on our shows, I Know Your Foes show last week, and he had a great piece on this that I'd really encourage anybody to read about how the Browns lost containment on that play. But essentially a 6-man pass rush came, and the Ravens blocked it with 5 because they only had to really put a wall up to keep the edge of the pocket safe. They fooled the edge defender. They got him to take bait inside on that play. The other blitzers were coming through the middle of the line, and they were all caught in their own wash as Lamar rolled right, had time, and those two poor defensive backs didn't know what to do. So they let Marquise Brown go and basically tried to corral Lamar, and that didn't work, of course.
Well, I think it was actually Vernon who ran into the defensive back who ran into the cornerback who was covering Marquise. I think that's what I saw when I watched
Vernon dropped. Vernon dropped on that play.
I think so. Now I could be wrong about that, but that's what I recall seeing when I watched the game again. But there was a collision, and to Lamar's credit, he recognized right away that Marquise had broken free, behind that collision, and he made the play. I mean, I guess the throw itself wasn't that inherently difficult, but I mean the circumstances and the recognition. I mean, it's, as we talked about earlier, it's one of the indelible plays that we'll remember in the history of the team.
It sure is. And it's nice to me that it wasn't an overthrown ball. You don't take any risk on an overthrown ball in that situation. He underthrew it as was right because there was so much space. And then Hollywood had to get started again, but there was still plenty of time to do it. So it's one of those perfectly thrown balls. When Lamar has had easy targets like that, and I particularly think of this on rollouts to the right where Lamar has an open receiver in front of them, he's often grounded the football unnecessarily. So I always have that fear that he's going to misthrow the football when he tries to hand it to a receiver. I think it was good in this case. He at least had to get it over the defense normally.
Well, and I wonder too, I mean, you said earlier, you feel like he's almost a better thrower when he doesn't have to overthink it. And this was an example of that, right? I mean, between the game situation, what had to be the adrenaline of coming out of the tunnel, going into the game without even a warm-up throw. And then, he's rolling out. I mean, that probably isn't a throw where you over-examine it, right? And maybe that fits perfectly.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, that's all God-given talent. And if you've ever played pool regularly, and a lot of people I know in Baltimore play pool, the leagues are big here. If you really want to take your time with every single shot, it's not necessarily when you're playing your best. When you know it, you just boom, 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 you go right through. And that's where Lamar was on 4th and 5 there. Just had that ability. So let's see what else we got. Running were amazing. What really struck me is how long it took them to get his shoes changed in that first half.
That was certainly fascinating. I don't. And Harbaugh got asked about the field today, and he said he didn't have a problem with the field conditions. That, I mean, that's just the reality of playing on these northern fields in December and January. But yeah, I mean, they didn't get it worked out until halftime. Man, I just, going back and watching the game again, he scrambled brilliantly, I thought. I mean, there were design runs too, and some of those were big plays, but I think there were at least 3 on their first few drives where he scrambled for first downs.
5 scrambles in the game, and I completely agree with you. But when the Cleveland was playing this man defense, and basically everybody's got responsibilities, that's when Lamar's at his best scrambling. And there were so many opportunities, and Lamar took advantage of them perfectly. A lot of the other design runs early in the year where they're still trying to do zone read. And we had Michael Crawford on the show. We talked a little bit about this. I want to make sure he gets credit. I'm not trying to name drop here, but the key is that we think he may have lost some lateral movement with that groin injury, that he doesn't have the ability to use his ability to read leverage as effectively on those outside zone reads where he's the runner going to the outside. And so they've been using him most of this year on the inside.
Although, I mean, the biggest run he had in the game was the one that was designed for him to go inside. Then he kicks it outside, and he kind of uses that remarkable improvisational ability where he weaves his way through 7 or 8 different defenders. And I mean, that's where he's magical, right? I mean, there's just nobody else like him. No,
it's always fun to watch, and don't ever take this for granted. If you've just gotten into the Ravens, maybe because of Lamar, or maybe you're just coming of age as a football fan, don't ever forget it, because there's not going to be another Lamar that comes along. You know, when I was a kid, it was Burt Jones, and there wasn't another Burt Jones. All of a sudden, he got hurt, and that was the end of good quarterback play in Baltimore for the entire Colt era. Well, yeah, they left.
Well, right. Which and the beginning of the Ravens era, really. I mean, except for the one Testaverde season. I mean, we had a 35-year run of sketchy quarterbacking.
Yeah, it was a dry spell, to be certain, and Flacco was good enough to get the job done. Was a great clutch playoff quarterback, but you're right, all those quarterbacks in between, my God, what a bad group. So anyway, we're lucky, and we should know it right now. Both teams scored at will with the run game. Cleveland didn't even get into a goal-to-go situation inside the 5-yard line the whole game, and yet they set this rushing record for most touchdowns by both teams in a game with 9.
Yeah, I mean, the whole game. I mean, especially the second half. I mean, it felt like the boulder was sort of rolling downhill on both sides, and who was going to have the ball last, right? I mean, because he certainly had no sense that the Ravens had any ability to stop the Browns in the fourth quarter. So I mean, it was fascinating. I mean, that's not the kind of game we usually expect to see this team play, right? I mean, it was yeah.
I mean, everybody was hurt for the Ravens. Having Levine in at slot corner is obviously big a disadvantage. That is a time where you can make different game decisions. And so one of the things I really thought is, first of all, if Lamar had run for the first down, it might have actually given the Ravens a better chance to win the game, because they could have potentially held the ball for a couple more first downs, kicked a field goal to win it. Another thing I thought of was, and this is not necessarily true, it's probably wrong, but if Hollywood had gone down at the 20, they might have had a better chance to win the game. Well, Hollywood gone down at the 1, I think actually would not have been a better chance to win the game. And so it's a strange thing, because the Ravens had to have a chance to get a first down to run the entire clock out. So I project on these situations, but one game you'll remember from only 4 years ago was that Christmas Day game at December, where they left way too much time on the clock for Pittsburgh, and Juszczyk had a chance to kneel at the 1-yard line, and I don't blame him, because that word's got to come in from the sideline, of course. But anyway, the Ravens certainly, I think, took a hit to win probability on that play. Anyway, thinking about it, how they actually won the game, they won it with the redraw value of actually letting Cleveland score, tie the game, and then come back. So anyway, it is what it is. Let's talk some scheme. One of the things that was, I thought, particularly impressive about the Ravens' run game was they still ran the ball effectively, even when they had McSorley at quarterback. So despite the fact that you would expect Cleveland to be jamming that box and making McSorley beat them, they were still able to run the ball effectively.
Yeah, I was the McSorley drive that obviously ended up with the Lamar touchdown. I mean, that's really exceeded my expectations from the beginning of that drive. Now, I mean, I guess McSorley really wasn't given a fair chance on his first drive because Hollywood drops the ball, right? I mean, who knows? But yeah, I mean, it showed that their basic run concept can work, even without a remarkable talent at quarterback. And look, I guess we saw that in the Steelers game too, right? With RG3. I mean, they were able to run the ball fairly effectively for stretches of that game. So, I mean, I guess there's a reason that Greg Roman has managed to, run such productive ground offenses, no matter what personnel he's had in various places, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. Thinking about McSorley's game here, I thought the 3rd and 10 throw to Snead really will be remembered in this game as one of the really obviously big clutch plays. The Ravens had to have it. He threw it. It was right on the money. Snead made a great grab on the play, which is an extra kind of little kicker to it. But I think it makes it also one of the plays. The comparable play from the Mile High Miracle is the 3rd and 13 throw to Pitta that got him off the 3-yard line, I guess.
Oh.
So it's it's one of those plays that I think we'll remember from this game.
And I have to confess, I sort of glossed over that play in my mind when I was watching the game live. So when I'm writing about it that night in the middle of the night, I didn't really have that play in my mind. But then when I went back and watched the game, I was like, holy crap, that was a huge play and a great catch by Snead, I thought. I mean, as you said, the ball was on the money, but it was high and it was a tight space. And look, I mean, Snead's a very tough player, and I mean that was sort of a perfect moment for him and a huge moment in the game.
Yeah, it had all kinds of strip potential, given that it was high. He had to bring it into the body, and then it looked like he was having actually a little bit of trouble holding on to it, but he did. It was a great play, and Snead's been a marvelous player for the Ravens this year. One of the things that's looked good in this, we play every 6 days, every other team plays every 7 days run, has been that the Ravens consistently seem to look fresher. The Cowboys were on 12 days, the Ravens on 6 last time. The Browns on 7, the Ravens on 6 this time. I guess the Steelers and Ravens were fairly similar after a long layoff. But I think it's been remarkable the Ravens have looked so fresh and able to run the ball in these last 2 games.
Yeah, and I mean, you wonder if did some guys benefit from having time off? I mean, I guess you can't really say you benefit from having COVID, right? I mean, but it does affect different people differently. I mean, Harbaugh talked about that today, and I mean, certainly Lamar in particular has talked about coming back feeling refreshed. I don't know about physically, but definitely mentally. I mean, it's hard to parse all this stuff, right? But I mean, absolutely agree with you. I mean, they've played with sustained intensity throughout these games. I get the defense looked maybe a little tired at the end, but some of that is just not have enough bodies too.
Yeah, they were undermanned, and on the defensive line, Campbell is not right, and that's a whole lot. And whoever else might be benefiting from COVID, I don't think it's Calais Campbell. I think he's had the calf injury, and he looks really slow on the field from that. But he may also be suffering some lingering after effects, and just feels like he needs to be out there because the Ravens' defensive line is in some horrible straits right now.
Now, he did say today that he felt better on Monday than he had the previous Tuesday, and that he felt better today than he did on Monday, and certainly better than he did at this point last week. So he still feels like he's moving in the right direction. So maybe that gives us some hope that he'll be close to the player that he wants to be by week 16, week 17.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in the camp that you sit him because I don't think the Ravens can really afford to do that. But on the other hand, I do believe anytime they have him active, they really have to have 5 linemen active, because you can't have 4, have one of them be Campbell, have somebody else get injured, and then you're really shorthanded. And they've been through that already a couple of weeks against Tennessee and New England, where they had injury problems show up during the game that they really didn't have the manpower for.
And then I know we don't want to get off track with defense, but
no, we love getting off track on the show. We really do. It's exactly what we live for.
But they certainly had to take heart, I think, from how well Matabike played on Monday.
Yeah, terrific game, and his best as a Raven, I think, to date. But yeah, what else do we have to say about the offense in this game? I think one of the things that has not been as big an issue as I expected it to be was the continued good blocking they're getting from the tight ends. Tomlinson. It was Culkin briefly. It was Wilson for a couple, 3 games in there or so before he got hurt. And now Tomlinson, he only played about 10 snaps in this game, but he really looked good as a blocker, I thought.
Yeah, I did too. And I mean, we've all written about. I mean, I think Andrews has made really good strides as a blocker overall this year. I have to confess, I did not pay super close attention to how he blocked on Monday. I'm sure you probably have a better idea of that than I do. But then also, I'm writing. I'm actually working on a story about Ricard this week, and I mean, I know he's not a tight end, but they talk about him as a quasi tight end, and they use him as quasi tight end sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think he's been terrific the last few weeks. I mean, playing a lot of snaps, and I mean, he eats up linebackers and even defensive ends. I mean, you watch the game film from Monday, and I mean, he's at the point of attack on a lot of their big runs. So
right.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I mean, having the sixth and the seventh offensive lineman they have with Boyle and Ricard, but even if it's Tomlinson and Ricard, that's been pretty good, or Wilson and Ricard, that's been very good. It's when they have to go to Skura, they're really compromising what they do in the. Actually, this is probably true with Ricard too. When Ricard goes out in the pattern, I don't think he's really very much of a threat. But when Ricard is on the end of the line of scrimmage, then you're already kind of signaling a limited set of routes to the opponent. So, Andrews there, much bigger threat. They have to completely respect that when he's in line in order what they do. And they kind of have to respect it with Wilson, I think, a little bit too. But I'm just so encouraged in terms of what they've been since they've lost Boyle, because I thought that was going to be a huge detriment. It was really going to impact their ability to run the football. And that really hasn't been the case.
No, I mean, this is their best 2-game running stretch of the season, right?
Oh, there you go. One interesting thing, the 2-point conversion. They've run a handful of pony backfields this year, but they ran pony. So they had Edwards lined up next to Jackson and jet motion from Dobbins right to left. And it ended up being Edwards who made the key block to lead that play into the end zone. And then Dobbins, of course, beat Sendejo pad on pad at the goal line. Very nice to see creativity come out at a time like that. It's almost like pulling out the Philly special in terms of how creative the Ravens ever get with something like that.
Yeah, that was a cool little moment. And probably one that was, again, easy to overlook in the greater story of the game, right? But I, that jumped out to me too, again, when I watched the game. It was neat.
Yeah, it would have been an extra level of drama to having it be a win or lose kick for Tucker as opposed to a win or tie kick for Tucker at the end of the game there.
Yep.
All right. Misdirection, we talked a little bit about earlier. They had a lot of 2-man misdirection. That ate up the Browns linebackers in this game. The pulls from left to right from Brown and Bozeman at the same time. Another, I didn't mention this for Bozeman earlier, but I'm going to forget if I don't say it right now. His fumble recovery was one of the biggest plays of the game. Dobbins, grounded the football. I think the ball rolled about 3-4 yards forward. Bozeman jumped on it. Obviously, the Browns jump on it. It's a pretty good chance that that's game over right then, but because they'll only need about 1 first down at that point. But very big play.
I guess you could also say that at that point in the game, the Ravens deserved to recover a fumble, right? It was the fates had been against them early, so it needed to tilt.
Yeah, I guess they've had 5 forced fumbles the last 2 weeks. They didn't recover it. Maybe more than that, but 4 by Humphrey alone, right? It was 2 in the Pittsburgh game. I'm kind of pulling games together, but anyway, 4 and then the one by Peters. But you're absolutely right; they needed to recover one. Okay, let's see. We hope we don't have to do anything about this. Are you seeing a big role for Des Bryant coming out of the COVID situation, just from the fact that he can practice and the others can't this week?
I mean, obviously, I think we would see a big role if one or more of those guys. I mean, if Boykin and Marquise can't play, then he would be shoved into a big role. I guess no. I mean, I don't see a big role for him if all those guys play. I still think they would probably like to try and see if there's a few situations where they can make use of him. I don't know if that would be red zone situations or if it would be more like we saw in the Tennessee game where, they're throwing those sort of quick ball control throws to him outside. I don't feel like they've had great success throwing to their other receivers on those kind of plays, and they could use more of those plays in their game plan. So I guess I could see some role there, but I don't think you can expect too much.
That's where I am at this point. I certainly didn't expect much when they picked him up. They've thrown to him 7 times now for 28 yards. And, people who talked about the big upside and whatnot, it's been surprisingly more than expected that he would have gotten as many snaps played as he has since the Ravens signed him. I mean, I thought, okay, there's a number of hurdles he has to get to even get one catch. One is he has to come and pass a conditioning test, and then he's going to have to practice, and they're going to have to really believe that he can get on the field and help them and not drop the football and be on the same page as Lamar in practice. And then he's going to have to get on the field, and he's going to have to not botch his first couple of opportunities, or there might not be more. And sure enough, he kind of cleared every hurdle sequentially. The only thing we really haven't seen is any hope that he could generate an explosive play for this team.
But I guess also, to be fair to him, I don't know that we can really judge what he has based on the opportunities he's been given in games. Now, I guess you can get into, is he getting open? Is he getting separation? I mean, I don't think he was getting a ton of separation near the end in Dallas, right? I mean, that was part of the complaint. So, you have to have those questions, but I don't think you can just say he has nothing to give either, because I don't know that we've seen him tested enough to say that.
That's fair enough. And you make a great point. Back in the Dallas days, though, he had 300 exactly targets in his last 3 years in Dallas and 150 exactly receptions. That 50% catch rate is completely unacceptable for a wide receiver. And yet it's different than what you see on any kind of practice video of a very large catch radius guy, which tells me he's probably not a particularly good contested catch guy when it really comes to NFL games.
Yeah.
All right. So this is a part of the show. We normally pick players. You're the guest. Pick a player you want to talk about, and we'll do that, and then I'll pick one.
Well, I guess we could talk about Gus Edwards. We haven't talked about him too much to this point. I thought he made some really clever reads as a runner where he got to the outside. I mean, I think people probably still have the image of him as this sort of pure battering ram runner, and he is that. But I mean, on both of his touchdowns, he made really clever moves to the outside, and I think he's, just listening to him talk, I mean, I think he's wanted to show that, this year, and has felt like he has that skill set and has really worked on it. But to see him do it in such essential situations and make it work, I thought was really impressive. I mean, you talked about how effective they were on the misdirection. I mean, on that first touchdown that he scored, that was a really good example of that. I mean, the whole line's going the other way. Lamar, I mean, first of all, you probably think Lamar's going to keep the ball in that situation, but he doesn't. He hands it off to Gus. And then the thought is, well, Gus will just go up the middle. But he reads the play and sees that it's essentially set up for Lamar to go outside. So he goes outside and he scores. And it's just good to see that flexibility from him. I was really, really impressed with that.
Yeah, so that's you're mentioning the first read. I couldn't agree more in terms of that. What I've also been impressed with is when he has to make one man miss, how much of his speed, how much of his momentum he conserves as he moves on the field with a slight snaky cut. And by the way, a runner like Gus Edwards, who weighs 235 pounds plus, that's all he needs to do. If he can get on the shoulder of that defensive back who's trying to bring him down, that's usually going to be how he makes that guy miss. He doesn't have to be like Lamar and make him fall over trying to catch him. He just needs to make him not hit him squarely. And I've been very impressed with that on the edge. He had a great run we talked about a couple of weeks ago, might have been last week, where he had just a snaky little cut to the outside, but maintained all of his speed effectively. And I think he's been very good at that this year. All right, let me pick a player here. I want to talk about Marquise Brown. Obviously, big hands problem for most of this game. Came up with the big catch that he needed to. I wonder what the thoughts are around the castle about who he's been this year, both as a receiver and with hands, but also maybe in terms of how his teammates and the coaches are viewing him in terms of how he's behaved.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the signal moment for that was the tweet, right? And everybody tried to sort of get past that quickly, and that was certainly the way that Harbaugh dealt with it. Didn't make a big deal of it. Said it was understandable frustration in the moment. I talked to him. He responded to it the way that I wanted him to respond. You certainly, I mean, not based on anything that anybody said. Do you get the sense that people have questions about him or his commitment? I mean, so I haven't gotten that sense. On the other hand, this is a very different year in terms of covering the team because we're not in the locker room. I mean, we can't just circulate and, talk to people off the cuff. Everything's on Zoom. And so everything sort of feels more formal. So I think if there was that sense, we probably wouldn't be able to read it as well this year as we would in a normal year. But I certainly have not gotten that sense based on anything I've heard. And look, I mean, the bottom line is we've still seen over the last 3 weeks. I mean, he brings an element to the team that no one else brings. I mean, he can still get behind the defense, and he's had a touchdown in each of the last 3 games. He's certainly had an uneven season, but I mean, they don't want to go into a game without him at this point because they don't have another guy like him.
That's absolutely true. All right, your turn. You got another player you want to talk about?
Well, I guess we can stick with the running backs. With Dobbins. I do think. I mean, they don't really have a number one running back still. I wouldn't say, but if they did have one, he's probably it, right? And I guess he has the best rounded package. Although it would be interesting to see them try to use him more as a receiver. We still haven't seen that. I mean, he was touted as having that ability coming in, and I know there was some debate about that among draft scouts. But I mean, we haven't seen too much of that. But he is very fun to watch as a runner. I think. I mean, the vision and the balance. I mean, I think he tends to get what he can get out of a carry, and we saw that. I mean, he didn't have a huge explosive play on Monday, but he had some very significant games at significant times of the game, and to me, he's making the case to get the ball more every week. I mean, I don't see that direction changing at this point.
So I completely agree. In terms of the vision and balance, the Ravens haven't had a guy like him since Ray Rice. I mean, they haven't had anybody with that kind of a low center of gravity who's able to go to the tripod, hand down with 2 feet and still get up and, spin out of that and maintain his contact. That was really important at the goal line. And that 2-point conversion, critically important that he's able to not get knocked over, knocked back, knocked any other direction that might have landed him short last night. I'm agree with you completely about the receiving component. Ray Rice had more of that. One of the things is Ray Rice is always in on third down. Dobbins is typically in on third down. Dobbins has proven to be a very good pass blocker, which is an unusual thing that they might be wanting to use him for that more and open up more opportunity with a receiving weapon, meaning a wide receiver or a tight end, as opposed to getting him into the pattern. But it seems very natural that a quarterback like Lamar, who extends plays very well, is going to want a check down option, even though often we think of Lamar as the check down option himself, is that his ability to run is that.
And I mean, nobody else has stepped into that role this year. And I mean, I feel like we've seen drives throughout this year that feel like they stalled because they didn't have that guy. I mean, I feel like we've seen lots of opportunities that would have been there that way that haven't been converted. And so, I mean, they're sort of crying out for that player right now, I think.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, Ingram obviously did a lot of that last year, but this year, Edwards and Hill, who've been on the field a little bit more, particularly in recent weeks, haven't looked good as receivers. So it really has to be Dobbins on third down. And I couldn't agree more. Let's talk about Mark Andrews at this point. Obviously, this was a really nice game, I thought, for the telepathic connection, whatever you want to call it, between Andrews and Jackson, showing up well in terms of off-scripted extended plays.
Yeah, I mean, the first big hit, the 39-yard pass to Andrews was 100% that, right? Because Andrews blocks to start the play, and then he releases, and Lamar showed, I thought, first of all, really, really good patience, and he scrambled well on that play just to sort of give himself time, and then that was just those guys. I mean, Andrews gets into space, and they do. They have a sense of how to connect, and you see that with him and Marquise at times. But I mean, there's just no comparison. There's nobody else on the team who has that telepathy with him, as you call it.
I think going to him on the last drive on what it was I guess three of the 4 completions on the last drive were to Andrews. So it was Andrews, Snead, Andrews. The 2 plays for 14, he probably was going to Andrews no matter what on those plays from the look of it. But Andrews also knew exactly how Andrews was going to break open on those 2 plays.
Yeah, and again, I thought he showed good patience on both of those throws. I mean, that was a frantic time in the game. I mean, he certainly could have gotten the timing wrong on those plays, but he didn't, and he seemed, as you say. I mean, again, this maybe gets back to what you were saying earlier, when he doesn't have to overthink it, and he's in react mode, and you certainly are in that situation where you're trying to move the ball in that time frame. He was right on point.
Yeah. Your turn. Any other player you'd like to discuss?
Well, I don't know. Should we talk about McSorley a little bit? I mean, we saw some extended run for him at a vital time in the game. I thought. He's looked pretty good in the 2 games that we've seen. I mean, he at least doesn't. The offense does not grind to a halt when he's running it, which is saying something. We still have not seen him asked to do a lot as an NFL passer, which would be the question, and would be the question based on what we saw of him in the two training camps. I don't know that he's somebody who's going to make starter level NFL throws consistently, and I don't think we've seen stuff in the games really to answer that question. But they don't fall apart when he's back there, and that makes him an interesting player as you think about them going forward.
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting decision next year. Obviously, Tyler Huntley is going to get a chance now, and Tyler Huntley will probably get playing time in at least one of these last 3 games if the Ravens have a lead. So I imagine they'll want to see in part what's going on. And it may come, he may get playing time in week 17 just because the Ravens are out of it. That could possibly be happening. It's not likely, but it is possible. And that may be a decision next year in terms of who is the backup quarterback. Huntley is a rookie now. McSorley's in year 2 or year 3? Year 2. Year 2. Yep. Okay, so he only has one more option year. The value there is kind of questionable as to which is worth more. He'll be coming off an injury, so there'll be questions about that. Obviously, I just thought a player like that who's on the margin of the NFL is always going to be concerned. Have I played my last NFL snap? Probably in the moment. And as he went off the field, the fact that he's still going crazy for the Lamar touchdown was one of the coolest moments about this game. These guys are going to war together.
Yeah, and I think just the way he's handled himself in general and the time that he's been here has been appreciated around the castle. Look, he was a big star in college. It's not a mistake that the Pennsylvania outlets that cover the Ravens give a huge amount of attention to Trace McSorley because he's still a massive figure in Pennsylvania, right? He was a star, and he's never acted like that in this context. He understands his role and he understands where he has to get better. And I think he's handled himself very well that way. Now, at the same time, I was one of those people who thought that Huntley outplayed him in training camp and seemed to show a higher upside in terms of explosiveness as a runner and as a passer. So it would be interesting if there were a reason that we had to see Huntley play the rest of this year. Now, I don't think anybody's hoping for that, right? Because certainly no Ravens fan is hoping for that, because that means that something has not gone the way that they wanted it to, unless there's just a blowout where he's in the fourth quarter, right?
Yeah, I'd be happy with that. I'd be up 30.
But I would certainly be very interested to see him play at some point, because I did think he showed some real standout tools during camp, and I would not have thought it was a strange decision if they decided to put him above McSorley coming into the season.
Yeah. All right. Great discussion here, Childs. Josh, tell us, what do you have for us in the mailbag today?
Before we get started, if growing an e-commerce business is your focus, you'll need a platform that's focused on growth. That's where Klaviyo comes in. Klaviyo is the ultimate e-commerce marketing platform for online brands of all kinds and all sizes. Whether you're just getting started or running a well-known brand, it gives you everything you need to send memorable branded emails, text messages, and more, so you can build strong relationships that keep your customers coming back. With flexible automations, powerful insights, and super precise targeting, Klaviyo is a faster way to turn great ideas into great customer experiences. That's why it's trusted by more than 40,000 brands like Living Proof, Huckberry, and 8 Sleep. In fact, on average, Klaviyo customers see a 41% increase in overall revenue within 5 months. Klaviyo scales with you, so you never have to switch. They support everything from garage startups to iconic billion-dollar brands. Want to learn more about how you can grow your brand with Klaviyo? Visit klaviyo.com/grow to get started with a free trial today. That's klaviyo.com/grow.
This year has us all wanting to be healthier, and that includes our eye health. But how do you get vision coverage if you're retiring? It's actually pretty easy. VSP, the vision coverage many people get through work, offers individual vision plans. Enroll anytime, on any device, and start using your benefits the same day. You don't need to be an employee to get employee-level vision coverage. Visit VSPDirect.com today. That's VSPDirect.com.
All right, we got a full mailbag because that's what happens when it's a game that people all get excited about. We get some comments. Yesterday, McSorley went onto the IR. How do you see that affecting backup quarterback? And does Colin Kaepernick get a call?
Okay, I'll take the Colin Kaepernick part first. I don't think there's any way in hell they call Colin Kaepernick. I think they've already indicated it's going to be Huntley. But also the onboarding process, wouldn't that be difficult this year to even get Kaepernick in the building at a point where he could help?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be immediate. I mean, they certainly couldn't have done it for this week. But no, I don't think there's any thought of any sort of radical outside solution because, first of all, I think they're comfortable with Huntley. Second of all, RG3 is supposed to come off next week. There's no indication that he's had any setbacks. And third of all, McSorley is not done for the year. I mean, they're talking about this as a 3-week injury. So if they were to make the playoffs, he would still be an option for them in terms of a backup or number 3. So I don't think this situation is drastic enough at all for them to think outside of really what they have now.
All right. How about Mark Andrews? Is it now time to consider an extension for Mark Andrews?
I think it's always time to consider an extension for your good third-year players. I don't know that Andrews is going to be eager to bite on an extension, but I'd love to see it. I mean, there's a lot of other third-year players on this team, Childs. I mean, I think Elliott is a guy you could extend now. He's had a great year from my point of view. I think you could spend money. I think you could give money to Bozeman at this point. And those are the kind of players that are more likely to make a modest third-year extension, say for 3 more years, that takes them out through their 6th year of their career, than the star players like Andrews, who are fairly sure that they're going to get paid after year 4.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I do think, I mean, Lamar, aside from Lamar, Andrews is the next big guy who's up in terms of the younger guys. I mean, obviously they'll have to figure out the pass rusher thing. Would they consider using the franchise again? I don't know. To me, that's a lot of money for either Judon or Ngakoue based on what we've seen in the market. But I'm sure they want it. I'm sure they want to get it done with Andrews. I mean, it feels like that. I mean, he's certainly the kind of player that they've done it with, that they've locked up in the past. But you make a very good point about the market. I mean, we've seen the tight end market kind of explode recently, right? So that has played into it too, and he's very aware of that. He wants to be a top tier tight end. He also wants to be regarded as a top tier tight end, and part of that is the respect of the contract. So I don't think we can assume that it will be easy to extend him. But I certainly wouldn't be shocked if it happened over the next 6 months.
Pick one player from among the third-year group that you think is likely to get an early extension, and then maybe one of the fourth-year guys who you think the Ravens are most likely to sign.
I kind of feel like of the fourth-year guys, I kind of feel like Bowser has put himself in an interesting position to be brought back on sort of a modest contract. I mean, I wrote about this the other day after he made the interception. We came into this year talking about, could he be another one of these guys who blew up as a pass rusher in year 4, which we've seen that over and over with the Ravens. I mean, Kruger, Zadarius Smith, on and on. That hasn't really happened. I mean, he's had some production as a pass rusher, though that doesn't necessarily show up in the sack total. But just the versatility he showed, and the fact that if they were to let Judon go, he can seemingly step into Judon's role, and you don't lose a ton because of that versatility. To me, he would be an interesting option for a fourth year. The third years, I mean, I don't want to be just unoriginal and piggyback on you, but I mean, I do think Elliott would make a lot of sense based on what we've seen and based on their patterns in the past. I mean, we know how much they value depth and security in the secondary, and he's not at a point where he's probably going to demand an outlandish contract, but I think he showed them exactly what they would have wanted to see from him this year. So I think based on their patterns of the past, that would make a whole lot of sense.
probably gets less than what Chuck Clark got last year because Chuck Clark was already the defensive signal caller when he signed his extension. So to me, Elliott is the only guy, and literally the only guy on that defense who could take over as the signal caller without the Ravens making a concession to who they are defensively. So they could make it be LJ Fort, say, but then they have to rebuild the defense in some ways to make him an every down linebacker. To me, Elliott is the obvious choice as the next signal caller if anything were to happen to Clark. So I like that call. I also would be perfectly happy with Bozeman. I want to go back to what you said about Bowser there too, because I really wonder what the bargain might be in a COVID year like the year that you could strike it. There'll be a lot of players re-signing, I think, short-term deals, one-year deals mostly, with their own clubs just to kind of wait out the COVID cap we're going to face next year, but about a $25 million reduction across the league. That's just going to create a tremendous scarcity of marginal dollars in the league for these contracts. And I don't see any other solution to it other than a lot of guys signing for less than they think they're worth.
Right. And I mean, Bowser, obviously, personnel guys around the league know all the players, so it's not like he's an unknown entity. But at the same time, he doesn't have the flashy pass rushing numbers, which is what we normally see, blow up in the market. And so I think the Ravens probably do have a fuller appreciation of what he brings to the table than anybody else. And I don't know, it just seems to fit the year and the need based on some of the other guys that they're going to have to make decisions about. And I also just think, he's another guy who I think has really handled himself impressively within what they've wanted from him. I mean, there was a time when he was really in the doghouse. When he and Tim Williams were talked about in the same breath as guys who could have been kicked out the door the next week. And Tim Williams essentially was kicked out the door the next week. But I think Bowser has always been a humble guy. He's put his head down and sort of understood the ways that he can add to the team without, getting a dozen sacks. And I think it's turned into a nice little story.
Right. So Bowser and Judon, because they're so flexible and effectively it gives the Ravens two Sam linebackers on the field who can linebackers who can drop to cover. Bowser is the Ravens' best coverage linebacker, including the inside guys. It's so rare. Can't even tell you how rare that is on an NFL team. But, last time it probably happened to the Ravens was with Adalys Thomas.
Yep.
In terms of having a guy like that. But, those guys are exceptionally valuable. It's very hard to find good Sam linebackers who can actually contribute when they drop. And the Ravens have two very good ones right now. It'd be a shame if they let both go. I mean, I understand they're probably going to lose one. They probably can't afford both. But boy, if they lose them both, that would be terrible.
And I feel like they wouldn't let them both go because I think they recognize that.
All right. Is Lamar allowed to audible? And if not, why not?
I think to a point he is. I'm trying to think when would have been the last time that we asked that of Roman or James Urban. Been a while. And they've always given
company line.
Yeah, they've always given very careful answers to that question. So I can't say that I really know the answer to that question.
There's something about Lamar that I want to kind of test you with and see if this is how you see it. I'm not actually giving you a test here, but Lamar Jackson is not a quarterback they've tried to run no huddle with. They don't really even do anything where they try and get him to the line of scrimmage at a 20-second point with a sugar huddle, and then he calls out protection, sees who he wants. Although he has ability to read the field pretty well, as we've seen in the past. Particularly, I'm thinking back to an LA game where he reads leverage pretty well in opposing corners and coverage players. But I think Lamar does a very good job improvising during the play, as well as most NFL quarterbacks, of the last decade or so, in terms of doing that. Obviously, he has his own tools to do that, and his ability to extend the play is wonderful. But he also, has the link with Andrews and the ability to find open players at different spots on the field that's up there, only a notch or two below Mahomes or Wilson, in terms of their ability to do that. Do you see it that way in terms of the difference between making a different call at the line of scrimmage versus making the improvisation during the play?
I do. I think he sees the field very well once the play has started. I agree with that. it's interesting, in terms of the precept stuff, because when you talk to him, and especially going into this year, he very much wants to be that guy. I mean, when he talks about his long-term goals, and when you talk to his quarterback coach at home, Josh Harris, about his long-term goals, that's one of the first things that comes up. I mean, he wants to be the sort of Tom Brady, galaxy brain guy who not only sees the field during the play, but wants to understand everything that's going on before the ball is snapped. And, he talked about wanting to understand everybody's job on the offense and everybody's job on the opposing defense. So he sees the whole picture, sees the whole chessboard. So that's something he certainly wants. And, I don't know. I'm not quite sure where the progress is with that. I'm not sure I know how to judge that, but I would at least say that's something that he thinks about and that is important to him. And so I would expect him to sort of push for that as time goes forward.
Yeah, it's kind of a natural evolution, I would think. And if he'll be a field general at some point, he'll lose speed. And by the way, loss of speed is not a linear thing in a football player. We've seen it this year. Lamar Jackson is not the kind of cutter that he was last year. He just doesn't have the same speed. As good as he looked, on Monday night, as good as he's looked at times this season, there's been long stretches this season where he hasn't seen the ability to make that outside guy miss the same way he did in 2019. Not surprising, but he'll have a degradation over time that is more or less downhill. We'll see. He'll lose a step, and he has to naturally make up for that in other ways. He has to read the field better. He has to be a better general at the line of scrimmage. He has to call out the particular blitz he's seeing. He has to do all of those things to read the field and communicate to his own players. And I think it will come fairly naturally in time. I think he's too instinctively good not to improve his own ability to communicate that at the line of scrimmage.
Well, again, I think the fact that he's so aware that that's his next major evolution and that he wants it so badly, I think that's a big first step in that direction.
It certainly was as a passer, wasn't it? I mean, what he did with Josh Harris, he made huge steps. So that's great.
All right. And I always think he audibles on every play, except he doesn't move anyone in the audible. He just decides to keep it himself.
All right.
So you don't have to tell anyone else in the audible if it's all on you. All right. Let's go out on an easy one because these have been some long answers for mailbag questions. What else does Justin Tucker have to do to be the greatest kicker ever?
Well, I mean, I think in absolute terms, I mean, if you take it outside of context, I mean, I think he is. I mean, we've never seen a kicker strike the ball the way that he does this consistently under all conditions, under all pressures. I mean, we could talk about context. I mean, what a kicker is in the NFL and what is expected of a kicker in the NFL is very different now than it was 20 years ago, vastly different than it was 40 years ago. So I mean, you have to take that into account. But in just pure, who's the best guy at kicking the ball? I mean, I think he already is.
Yeah, there's no question in my mind. He certainly leads all of the important statistical categories. One of the things that's annoying and keeps happening is that there's a rookie kicker who'll come in and make 19 out of 20 kicks. And all of a sudden, he's got a higher career field goal percentage than Jackson. But there's a lot of 400 hitters on April 20th. There are almost no 400 hitters. In fact, there hasn't been one since 1941 at the end of the season. So that's the kind of thing we have to realize here is that nobody can generally keep up that pace for very long. Tucker has done it at the highest level for a very long time. And I agree, Childs, the game has changed in terms of the higher percentage of kicks made. Still think Tucker has exceeded that by more than all of the kickers before him.
Well, and to the point you just made, I mean, remember, it wasn't very long ago that it was he and Dan Bailey who were neck and neck as the most accurate kicker of all time, right? And now Dan Bailey is talked about as this sort of tragic figure who everyone is afraid when he lines up to kick a field goal. So that tells you all you need to know about how hard it is to sustain year after year after year. And Tucker's on the way to that sort of Vinatieri estimation, right? I mean, maybe he has to hit a crazy field goal in the snow in the postseason. I don't know, but I think he's there to me.
All right. Outstanding to have you on, Childs. Fantastic stuff. This is a great conversation. We love having people who bring a little bit different insider view in your case, along with the analysis. Tell people about where they can contact you, what your Twitter is, and maybe a little bit more about your writing with the Sun, because you show up in other places than the sports section.
Yeah, I'm kind of the weird guy who's done everything over the years. So I've been at the Sun grew up in Baltimore. I've been at the Sun since 2001, which is a little frightening to me at this point. But actually, I came in on the news side. So yes, I mean, I've done a lot of non-sports stuff over the years, politics and higher education, and any number of things. But I've been a sports writer more than not, and I've done a lot of things within that too. I mean, the Ravens is my primary thing, and I mean that's kind of what I do from probably 9 months out of the year. But I do the Triple Crown every year, horse racing. What Olympic stuff we do, I do that. I mean, so I covered the Rio Games in 2016. I've written a lot about Michael Phelps over the years. So always been kind of a jack of all trades. But yeah, every week you can read I do, I'll have at least one Ravens feature every week, along with Jonas and Daniel. And, I do the scouting report every week, and then the 5 things, the goes up the morning after the game at 5 a.m. So those are dependably there every week during the season. And Twitter is just at Childs Walker, very, very easy. And I'm easy to find. I'm here to stay, I believe.
All right. Lifelong Baltimore guy like me, always love to have that conversation. Good about responding to people on Twitter. I'll ask that question. I don't mean to expose you here if you really take a long time to respond, generally.
No, it's a fair question. I think I'm decent about responding. I'm generationally not of the social media generation. I mean, I'm in my 40s, so I didn't grow up with it. It doesn't come as naturally to me as it does to some of the younger writers. But certainly if people ask me questions, I will try to answer. I'm probably not posting as much as a lot of other as most other writers, but that's probably to my own discredit.
All right, so no TikTok for you.
No TikTok for me. No. I'm trying to remember which platform it was that I died at. I mean, I don't have an Instagram account. I mean, you have to follow athletes on Instagram because they're constantly posting information there. But I kind of tapped out at Twitter.
Of course. All right, and then Ken, over on filmstudybaltimore.com, we have a new situation room. We've got the defensive breakdown. We've got a bunch of articles. We've got a whole bunch of charts and graphs. The site's really gotten a whole lot of content in the past 3 days that people need to go check out.
Let me point out the charts and graphs directly because that's a new contribution. It's outstanding. So a guy named Brent Dawson has put those up there. We've had the offensive line charts already. That's done by a different guy, Josh Mostaico. Brent Dawson does these. He does lots of Lamar graphs that are wonderful. There's a lot of information there. In addition to that, he's going to be putting up some ample time and space graphs. So if you're always wondering what I'm talking about, ample time and space, the divisions will be made now into 3 categories: ample time and space, ball out quick, and pressure events, and you'll be able to see that visually across the entire season. So this visualization I thought was a very important step forward. Really appreciate Brent doing this for us.
Yeah, and they're all up on there under a section called charts and graphs. You can't miss it. All right, well, we still got more to do this week. There's another offensive article is going to come out soon. We've got Know Your Foe recording tomorrow night. We've got By the Numbers recording the next night. Again, this week is confusing me. Thursday night, Friday night. There we go. And we get back to normal with football on Sunday.
Be good to have a 1 o'clock game again.
I was
How
going
about
to
you,
say,
Giles? Are you ready for 1 o'clock football again, Giles?
Oh, you can't even imagine how much I'm excited. Just fingers crossed. Nothing too crazy the rest of this week because I mean, God, it's been a month, right? Since the Tennessee game.
Nobody understands just how difficult it is. If you write about the Ravens or you produce content after games, just how much of an inconvenience it is to have night football.
No, on Monday night, I mean, given that game, the importance of it, the drama of it, the fact that we had no idea how it was going to end until it ended. I mean, I was up until 3 a.m, filing, working on the 5 things. So, I mean, I could do that a couple times a season, but I certainly don't want to do it every week.
All right.
So make sure you check all that out. Make sure you're spreading the word on the show, sharing on Twitter and Facebook and TikTok, I guess, if you use it, tell people there as well. And head on over to Apple Podcasts and iTunes and write us a review. Give us 5 stars. That helps out the show a lot. All right, guys. Well, we will talk again soon.
ziplining across a vast valley, roasting s'mores beside the lake, whitewater rafting, relaxing beside an ocean view pool. Well, trying to at least. There are lots of great things to dream about doing in South Carolina, so when you're ready to visit, South Carolina is ready to make those dreams a reality. From a classic road trip to a relaxing weekend getaway, South Carolina is open for discovery. Start planning today at discoversouthcarolina.com.